during these 8 years, we were struck with which I call the perfect storm. We had war, we had terrorism, we had natural disasters. I think we had the biggest disaster, climate disaster, which was Idai. And we just had one last week, and I think this one came twice. It decided to come 1 week and 3 weeks after. So for us, natural disaster is something that we don't read on the books, we live with it, it's part of our equation. And also we have economic downturn, so everything that the specialists say that affects food security, we have. And this is the biggest question, and we hear the world. Actually, we are very aware of what people are talking around the world about food production. But the reality is that in my country, 80% of the population live out of their own production. They feed themselves out of their own production. And the question that we ask is if there is shortage of food around the world. And when you see the numbers, you don't see shortage of food. So sometimes we ask what are we doing with food waste? Because there's a lot of food waste around the world, and one of the reasons that we have problems of climate is because of our policy in terms of food consumption. If you change and you do a right policy for food consumption around the world and optimize the food that you already produce, I think there would be enough food for everybody. And this question we also ask to ourselves in Mozambique. Do we have shortage of food? And eventually you realize that no, there's no shortage of food. The question is if households that work in agriculture to produce food have enough income to buy the food for themselves. And you realize that no, this is the real paradox. People that produce food don't have money to buy food or enough money to buy food. So our priority shifted from all agro indicators to household income. Increase household income in order for them to have capacity to have access to food. And obviously in this matter you need to respect the culture, the stage of development that they are. So you cannot import solutions from wherever and go and impose there, because it won't work. I've been saying that households that work on agriculture are the best risk managers, and they got it right, because they've been afraid to adopt our solutions. When I say our solutions, I mean urban solutions, because they know you'll run away eventually. And this is happening all the time in Africa. You find families that go into programs, they get into programs, they say the income increasing, and the program is for 4 years, 3 years, and then they go back to poverty. This expectations, managing expectations, and this system is creating and transforming Africa into a lab of experiences of fighting poverty. So it's time to change. The real paradigm shift that we need to do is policy. If you're going to be next to a producer, food producer, you must plan to stay there at least 7 years. We call it, at least he can graduate. Thankfully, most of the projects of the World Bank that we are doing are very successful. We had this perfect storm, but the economy is still growing above 4% because of agriculture. Represents 25% of our income, of our GDP, and it's making a big difference. But one of the things that we've managed to do in the last years is to bring back belief into our agriculture sector, or into 80% of the rural areas in Mozambique. Now, my biggest challenge is to convince the World Bank and the partners. You asked the question, how could you help me? It's to be consistent. It doesn't have to do with the amount of money. You need to be consistent with the policies that you're making. Obviously, we need to improve in terms of monitoring all the time, but consistency is the key word. If you invest in sustainable agriculture, you'll be changing the world. But at least start looking at yourself, because it doesn't make sense spending more money with summits and meetings if there is no change of mind change. So the problem is not climate change, it's mind change. Thank you.